I don't know anymore, and I say this as someone who's covered the economy for decades, what it would take for people to feel optimistic about the economy. And I get it. I mean, we all need to keep working and all that stuff to pay for things. But with the job numbers, especially as high as they've been, it's got to be baffling, especially the Democrats who've been in office now for 4 years, why people are so down on the economy.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm well, Michael. Thank you. Wondering if any Elon Musk company will remain in the Bay Area.
Yeah, it's been a lively week and not really that much about tech, but we've had one big tech one as of yesterday or Wednesday. Let's talk about that because I remember a few months ago you were on the show here and we were talking about a press conference at HP headquarters featuring Elon Musk and Gavin Newsom, Governor Newsom. And even though they weren't holding hands, they at least made an attempt at being positive about each other. What the hell happened?
Well, I was thinking of that because that very press conference came after Musk had once again dumped all over the Bay Area and California and said he was going to move. And I think that's when Tesla headquarters officially moved to Texas.
Yep.
And then, strangely enough, the governor of California is side by side with him talking about a new innovation center opening in Palo Alto. So here we have earlier this week, Musk saying he will, for political reasons, who knows, move both X and SpaceX headquarters out of California to Texas. And again, it's symbolic, much like Oracle earlier and even Tesla, the workers didn't all go. But it means symbolically what it means, which is he's even more fed up with California. I don't know about the innovation center. Does that still stay? Like I imagine many of the workers will still stay in the Bay Area.
Yeah. Now, leaving aside the whole moral question and all that, his explanation, do you buy his explanation that it had to do with this new statute, this new law in the state of California? Now, I think on one hand, I know he has a transsexual child, and he's been pretty outspoken about all of this. But do you think that was the proximate cause of him deciding to do this, or is this just the next step of a piece of him moving to Texas?
It could be both at the same time. I mean, I don't know how much he really cares about that California law. Although he has, and we've all watched it in real time, made a move to the right quite considerably over the last few months, even years. And this is perhaps part of that. But he's been fighting with, on the county level, on the city level, on the state level, the West Coast for a long time.
Yeah.
And part of that is political. Part of it is the extra money that it costs to do business in California or even the Bay Area. So it's tough because he has been so vocal against anything seen as he would say, woke or liberal, that it's hard to say that this really smashed through a barrier, or if it's just an excuse for him to pull the plug and say, that's why I'm moving out of the state, or at least moving the official headquarters designation out of the state. So like with anything with him, it's a lot of noise, and who knows what will really come of it.
Yeah, I'm struck that he's announced all these moves, but he mainly moves the headquarters, which allows him to be in Delaware, be in Texas, not pay taxes, but he keeps all the intellectual capital here, all the smart people. Do you really think he's going to shut down X in San Francisco and move all those people to Texas?
Well, think about what came ahead of this. Massive layoffs. So there's barely anyone in that building anyway.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them working from home. I know he's sort of spoken out against that. But there are still a whole lot of people that are not in that headquarters. And for them to say, we're leasing the whole thing out, which they said even prior to his, we're moving statement, almost made sense, because that's a whole lot of room with a very few Twitter employees or ex-employees. And even before that, people were saying he wasn't paying rent, and then the big X on top that they made him take down. It's been a a battle of things that have nothing to do with the core business. And so
Yeah.
you can see how occasionally investors, not to mention employees, would feel distracted by all the noise that surrounds what they're trying to do as a business. And if this clears the way for whatever X does from here, maybe it's for the best because we get a more focused company. But can you really have that with Musk doing so many things and making so many outlandish
Yeah,
statements?
focus isn't a word I use a lot with Elon Musk's company. You know,
I get it.
the city that seems to be hurt the most by all this is probably Hawthorne in Southern California, where SpaceX is, because he could easily move all of that to Texas and still make use of, the space facilities there, and is even closer to Florida. So that might be, he may have a whole different motive for that move.
True. And I don't know how many people are in Hawthorne versus Texas right now, but he has big presences in both places, which makes sense given the space program. And so I don't know, again, with the headquarter designation, does that mean people who live in that part of California can stay? It usually does. After all, when Larry Ellison did this and said, well, Oracle is now a company based here instead of in the Bay Area, you still have all these Oracle workers in the Bay Area. So I don't know what it means, but the space program is growing in Texas, as a lot of tech is growing in Texas these days.
What do you think of the childish, I won't say pissy, I'll say childish exchange back and forth between Newsom and Musk? Uh, Basically, Newsom pointed out that an old tweet by Donald Trump saying, he came to the White House and begged me. I could have made him get down on his knee and beg to get more support to keep his companies alive from the federal government. And Newsom's comment was, you never got off your knees. And that was Musk's reply. Newsom said you had to bend a knee to Trump, and Musk replied back, "You never got off your knees." It was really kind of a schoolyard taunting back and forth. What the hell is that about? It looked like 14-year-olds.
It did. And the playground has been replaced by Twitter, and that's where they had this exchange. And, I don't know. I mean, Trump, and this goes a little away from tech, but it has to do with tech because now, as we know, Donald Trump has chosen JD Vance to be his running mate. JD Vance has a lot of VC ties here in Silicon Valley. Gavin Newsom, obviously, as governor, is heavily involved in all this stuff. And Trump has been hot and cold on California, hot and cold on VCs, heck, hot and cold with his relationship with both JD Vance and Gavin Newsom. And so to say, wow, they're having this childish back and forth, come on, it's a day ending in Y, right? At this point, between those three people. And I don't make anything of it whatsoever. Vance said some horrible things about Donald Trump, and now he's running alongside him. Newsom has said some thoughtful things about Trump when there's been federal aid back and forth or EV legislation or whatever, but they also fight a lot. It's posturing, and I don't think it means anything.
And as we know, it's an election year. As you know better than me, because you're having to cover all this, it is an election year, and it's a crazy one at that. And we all predicted it was going to be a nutty 2024, but I think we had no idea just how nutty it would be and how soon. It's only summer. We got 5 more months to go. So anyway, let's talk about stocks. We had a sell-off this week, and this doesn't seem to be profit sharing. This seems to be reorienting people's portfolios. And the folks that got hurt most were the big mega cap tech companies. The Dow slid 533 points on Thursday, at closing it back down near 40. NASDAQ dropped. NASDAQ went 0.70%. Losing to 17,871, and the S&P dropped 0.78%. Is this the bubble bursting, at least in the market, regarding tech stocks?
No, I mean, you've asked that for a little while now, and I would say these are so far short-term moves. I mean, remember, you talk about NVIDIA gets hit. There are concerns about China, whether they take the chips. But then on the very day the NASDAQ falls, NVIDIA has a good day because TSMC earnings come in and they say, the AI chip demand remains strong, which brings more money back into NVIDIA. So these are day-to-day moves. They're bigger than usual because the stakes are higher and the dollar values are higher. And so we're dealing with $3 trillion companies here. And I don't mean three individual $1 trillion companies. I mean companies worth $3 trillion. There are also a lot of $1 trillion and $2 trillion companies at this point. And so the bigger they come, the harder they fall. And I am almost surprised we haven't had a long run of givebacks or profit taking or just bad news, especially given the chaotic nature of what's going on with the political scene right now. But people have sort of moved the finance away from politics. And so it being the stock market and the economy, I would say has performed very maturely alongside the sort of craziness of our political scene, and has gone up and down based on honest to goodness news.
The reason I ask that is I keep seeing these charts that show the Dow going like this and consumer satisfaction going like this, which is usually a telltale sign of a recession. And yet the market is still at nosebleed levels, setting records almost every week. It's hard to predict what's going on out there. Unemployment's up, but other parts of the economy are doing great. I was just going to mention as a later item here, interest rates fell to 6.77%, the lowest since March. That's a great sign.
Well, I think the big question is why people, and I get that people are a little nervous about the economy. That makes sense. But especially, and I don't want to predict anything here, but especially if Joe Biden loses or the Democrats lose and the Republicans win, one of the stories I think is going to be how over the last few years of consistent job growth, of consistent wage growth, of consistent stock market growth, of fighting and beating back inflation and gas prices, people have still felt negative about the economy, or at least they talk negatively about the economy. And I don't know anymore, and I say this as someone who's covered the economy for decades, what it would take for people to feel optimistic about the economy. And I get it. I mean, we all need to keep working and all that stuff to pay for things. But with the job numbers, especially as high as they've been, it's got to be baffling, especially the Democrats who have been in office now for 4 years, why people are so down on the economy. And the Republicans are able to, understandably, use that skepticism as part of their platform. But it's a surprise because the numbers have shown that things have actually been quite strong for quite a long time.
It's an irony that the party of Jefferson doesn't quite understand what's going on. And, I trust the people that they sense something's wrong, but I can't quite put a finger on. I know it's hurting them in the pocketbook when they go shopping, but they got jobs. If they have stock, if they have a stock in a portfolio, it's doing pretty well. Why the concern? Is it a structural thing? They don't trust the institutions anymore.
What institutions would they not trust? I mean, it's not like
the Secret Service, for example.
Oh, I see.
Week, the FBI.
I thought you meant financially. I would say there is skepticism largely because people like to complain, and if there is something to complain about, as there is with rising food prices, rising gas prices that we've seen, certainly housing prices, and I don't just mean here in the Bay Area anymore. I mean across the country. That is a concern and a legitimate concern, whether you're older and facing rising college costs and housing costs, or if you're younger and just looking out at an economy that's going to cost a lot of money. But if you have a job, so far, you've been able to mostly pay for those things. And the economy traditionally runs into recessionary times when wages go up, when we've put extra money into the system to fight back against a pandemic that shut things down for a while. These are naturally occurring things that we should have seen coming from a mile away. So the overall negativity is a surprise. And I think should the Democrats lose this election, one of the things that parties on both sides will have to do going forward is figure out how to better message when things are good and when there is economic strength to convince people that they should not worry as much about that. And that's something that I think will be talked about a lot post-November election.
Well, one of the things we're going to see, it looks like sooner, maybe later, with these interest rates falling, inflation rate falling, that there's a lot of pressure now on the Fed. It looks very likely the Fed's going to cut interest rates in September. They're moving towards that. They're showing every sign is doing that. But I'm beginning to hear calls for let's do it sooner than that. Now, you think that will have any impact on the election?
It's rare to see an interest rate move that close to an election. But remember, we thought at the top of the year we would see interest rate cuts because the Fed had gradually started, to beat back inflation. But it never got to that 2% level. Yes.
You're expecting 4 this year, remember?
Right. And then that went down to 3, 2, and maybe 0, and now sort of 1. And so, yeah, it might be a surprise to see one close to the election. But I think it's what people are waiting for, especially those who maybe have been on the sidelines thinking about buying a house or a car or something where the interest rate would affect their credit. And it'll be interesting to see how the markets respond, how people respond, because so far the markets have been very robust for a very long time. And consumers, even the data that came out this week, show that people are still shopping.
Right. The only other data I mentioned, 6.77% on the mortgage rate, which is great. But a lingering thing is rentals, that the average rent price is $300 more right now than it was pre-pandemic. It hasn't really come back. And is that because of the shortage of apartment stock?
I mean, a little bit. I would say, just having done a lot of stories on this, that it's a little more because of the shortage in housing. People are not buying housing as much, partially because there's a shortage of inventory, but also because of these extreme high prices. So more people have gone to rent, and they can afford a little more because these are people who might buy houses. Also, you've got these tech companies in expensive areas bringing people back, saying you've got to go now even 3 days. Salesforce just said between 3 and 5. So you're starting to see people say, okay, I have to live near these companies.
Yeah, I can't live in Lake Tahoe anymore. Yeah.
Right. So they have to live near housing shortage, really expensive. You get sort of a young workforce for tech, so they tend to rent more, and that pushes up the rental market.
Okay, let's talk about Netflix. Now, this is another example of the market reacting weirdly to good news. It's oddly pessimistic, but Netflix reported second quarter earnings that beat all expectations on Thursday. But the stock fell as much as 6% in after-hours trading because it didn't quite meet the high expectations for the quarter. Revenue hit $9.56 billion in second quarter, an increase of 16.8% compared to last year. And it amazingly, some of the numbers about subscriptions and advertising revenues were up as much as 30%, and they gained 1 million new subscribers. How can you come out pessimistic on that as an investor? Netflix is going great guns. I mean, some of these other outfits are hurting right now. And you got an operating margin of 26% compared to last year's 25%.
Well, I mean, again, I think if we're talking in the short term, you see the drop. But I mean, Netflix stock, even after hours on the day it reported earnings, traded in a $30 range. It was down about $25, then it was up $5, then it was pretty much flat. You're talking about a $275 billion company that trades at nearly $700 a share. So a move of $20 either way is really, I mean, if you're a shareholder, you like it or don't like it. I get that. But come on, we're not talking big moves here. And I think often after any sort of an earnings report. A company with that high of a handle is just going to get hit because there's profit taking. There's people who expected more. But I mean, goodness, Netflix, this is a company that's just killing it and is still, after many, many years and many, many competitors, setting the standard for streaming, which is for many people the default way that we get our entertainment. And they are out front and their investors are really, really being rewarded.
Yeah, well, the complaint was that Netflix was, it was creating a lot of shows, but they were none were any good. But now they're getting hit shows out there, and when you can pull in 1 million subscribers 20 years down the line, that's an impressive achievement.
Right. And they continue to come up with big content because they're not afraid to spend. Remember, they were criticized some years back that they were going to spend all this money. That's now the model. Whether you're Apple or Peacock or Disney, you're spending, Amazon spending huge money to come up with literally cinematic movies, not to mention series. Right. I mean,
it's got to show the money on the screen.
Exactly. And this is a great age of streaming entertainment, and Netflix is far, I think, out front.
Okay, so I have some bad news. You're not going to like this item, but Ford has decided to repurpose its Ontario production plant, which it was originally intended solely for electric vehicles. They're going back to gas-powered cars. Backed it for a total of $1.3 billion earmarked for EVs. They're going back to trucks. They're going back to, big iron piston Ford F-150s. And they're between, they're big Super Duty trucks. So, and it's going to add 1,800 workers to the plant. What do you think of all that? Did the Detroit big companies, big car companies, they just screw it up? Did they not take seriously EV? It seems like they put a lot of money into it, but they put a lot of money into the Edsel. I mean, they make mistakes. Or is this just the big shakeout of the EV world, the first shakeout? I mean, these bubbles form and they burst. But it looks like only Tesla is actually killing it in pure EVs and not hybrids.
Correct. And I think there is something to be said for Ford missing an opportunity, because let me just throw this at you. The Cybertruck is way outselling the Ford F-150 EV. And that's a little baffling, not just because the Cybertruck is, kind of a love it or hate it sort of thing that's very expensive, but the Ford F-150 is the proven not only truck, but automobile model in America. It's the best seller year after year. And if people have any appetite for EVs whatsoever, yeah, well, and if people have any appetite for EVs whatsoever, which largely thanks to Tesla, we know they do, that F-150 should have been a big, I expect it to be the equivalent of when the football team crashes through the banner onto the field. Like that should have opened up a lot for the Rivians and the Cybertrucks of the world. Instead, it trails those guys, and that's a surprise. And I think that's a mistake. And I don't know what they did or how they made the mistake, but I'm surprised that Ford didn't sell or isn't selling a whole lot more F-150s, because they didn't change it all that much. It still looks the same. It just doesn't use gas, which should be a couple of positives. If you want to buy a Cybertruck, you have to want that look as well as a truck. But the F-150 is the F-150 anyway. So it is.
Guys, you get people like Kanye buying a Cybertruck.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me. There have always been the celebrities that will spend big money to look and be different. I get that. But the F-150, I thought, was going to appeal to a whole lot of truck owners.
I thought it looked the same, and it probably has more torque, which is kind of what you want in a truck.
Right. But you're starting to see a lot of Cybertrucks out there. We've already been seeing a lot of the Rivians, and that's great. And I thought that there would be even more F-150s, and there's not. And so Ford is, in my opinion, taking a step backward. And I don't know what else to say other than I understand. And I think you're right at the top to say it makes a little sense that EV sales slow a bit. Those who wanted it can get it now that they're affordable. Those who want it can afford it. But you still have to want it. And if people aren't wanting it as much, and part of it is structural. It's still, no matter how efficient your car is, it still takes much, much longer to charge than it does to fuel up at a gas station. And that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Amazon Prime Day was this week, 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday. When you think about consumers being nervous about spending money, well, they spent $14.2 billion over those 2 days, and that's 11% jump from last year's $12.7 billion. So when we hear that consumers are wary about spending money, they're not wary about spending money when they get a bargain day. And
Right.
Amazon.
I mean, to me, Prime Day is a non-event, and I don't mean to say, I mean, there wasn't a ton of money spent. There is. It's just, Prime Day used to be like, well, let's introduce people to online shopping, and we don't have to do that anymore. And so to say there's a Prime Day is, I don't know. I mean, do we really need Valentine's Day to introduce people to the idea of love? No, it's nice, but so Prime
Frankly,
Day
we may soon need to have a retail Prime Day, so you can go to actually find out how shopping in stores works.
Right. All these young people looking at us old folks and being like, oh, so that's what a cash register is. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
I mean, aren't you used to now when you're home all the way up to 11 o'clock at night, there are Amazon trucks and UPS trucks and FedEx trucks going up and down your street?
Sure.
On my street, there are more of those delivery trucks than there are people's passenger vehicles.
Yes, absolutely. And this is how we shop. I get it. It's not a surprise to find out that people are buying a lot of stuff online anymore.
Yeah, I ordered a coffee grinder. I ordered it 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon, and it was on my porch when I got up Tuesday morning.
There you go.
I don't even know how physically you can do that, but there it is. And,
welcome to the present.
Oh, yeah, welcome. The 21st century is here. At least in our everyday life. We can look up at Starlink going over, but to have something delivered to our house overnight from the other side of the country, still kind of a miracle. Okay,
yes.
Finally, Microsoft has announced that we mentioned NVIDIA before. Their GeForce Now is being integrated with Microsoft's Xbox game players, which means that you can choose between Xbox cloud gaming or use NVIDIA's service when looking at a supported game page online. Once again, NVIDIA is moving out into the larger economy. I mean, to see it linked with Microsoft is interesting.
Used to be Wintel. Now they have to come up with something else. Maybe
I don't know how we have to pronounce a combination of Microsoft and NVIDIA, but
WinVidia.
Yeah, you can see that it's absolutely there. You got it. It says something important. NVIDIA is not standing still. It's going out and making partnerships with other giant companies, and is a glimpse, I think, of the rest of this decade. And that's it for now, folks. You can find us on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. You can see Scott on Facebook and X, and of course, almost every weeknight on NBC Bay Area. He's going to be on it, I think, in a few minutes, given all the events of this week and other ones he's waiting for. And you can hear me regularly on the BBC World Radio show, Business Matters. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.